Greetings to my respected elders, my brothers and my sisters, and to all those who are not yet believers. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. All praise is to Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. We send blessings and peace upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of his followers until the day of recompense. Brothers and sisters, first and foremost, thank you to Ahmed F for his most recent donation to the Dawah Project. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you with peace and prosperity. Ameen. Secondly, brothers and sisters, please continue to donate to the Dawah Project, inshallah, if you are able. It is sadaqah. This goes into the path of Allah, the cause of Dawah, inshallah. It allows me to continue to make content and also to find the rental location for masjid / muslimah / Dawah Center, in which case I can form the outreach program and the Anur of Submission outreach podcast, inshallah. If you haven't, be sure to like and subscribe, and inshallah, if you could consider becoming a member to the channel. This is a tier level thing. You have different tiers that are involved, inshallah. So please consider that. There are perks and tiers for every level, and we got something for everybody on affordability, starting at like $2.99 a month at the lowest tier, which comes with its own benefits, super chats, live comments, etc., etc. So anyways, inshallah, you could do that. Please join the channel and become a member, inshallah, and may Allah bless you and reward you. Ameen. Now, brothers and sisters, my chapter 2 of where I came from, the early childhood years. I was talking last time about my dad. Ended off talking about my dad and kind of his situation with alcohol and things of that nature. And I have to kind of go back in order to go forward, which is oftentimes the case when we tell a story, when we relate something. And my mother and my father, they were married very young, before I was conceived, and my dad, like I said, he already played in a cover rock band, and he was already heavily addicted to alcohol. All right, and my mom was doing the best she could. You know, I already had an older sister, like I said, from a previous marriage that my mother had, and my sister's father and her, they didn't work out either. This is the way of the West, okay? Multiple marriages, multiple divorces. You know, this is we just repeat the patterns that we see everybody else repeating. So, with that being the case, my dad was basically a maniac. He was a maniac, heavily addicted to alcohol, and he was one of those alcoholics who was an abusive alcoholic. All right. And I'm sharing this content with y'all and this story with y'all not to try and smear the character of anyone, okay? That's not my intentions here whatsoever. For a lot of years, I blamed a lot of my poor decisions and my problems on the behaviors of my parents, etc., etc. Once I found out in psychology that was the thing that that people could justify their bad behavior and blame it on their parents. I did that for several years until I finally had to wake up and take responsibility, mashallah. So, anyway, so my dad, being the alcoholic and maniac that he was quite abusive to my mom and to me as well. Even as a small child, he would get drunk, and in these drunken rages, and he would physically abuse my mom, and astaghfirullah. May Allah grant him forgiveness and guidance to Islam. Ameen. But he was physically abusive to her and to me as well as a kid, and also tried to be physically abusive to my sister. You know, all of these things. They were physical abuse, but not SA type of abuse. You understand? At least not to my recollection, and not to my sister's recollection or my mother's. But they were all kinds of physical abuse and emotional abuse and control and things like that. So my mother put up with this type of stuff for as long as she could, And my dad, he was an only child, the only child of my grandfather, my papa, the one I call papa, on my dad's side. And therefore he was, quote unquote, the only son, firstborn son, daddy's boy type of thing. And as a result of that, he enjoyed a lot of protection from my grandfather, who was well known throughout the community. He wasn't particularly a religious man or anything. He didn't go to church. He attended church, but I believe that was more of a mirrored facade type thing, just to stay in good standing with the community, because he never was religious whatsoever. And later on in life, maybe when I'm about 12, 13 years old, you know, I was a kid being a kid and being nosy, and I actually came across a lot of suspect type witchcraft type voodoo type material in his house, in his bedroom. Being a nosy kid, you know, you be digging and pilfering through everything, and I found little voodoo dolls, and I found little trinkets and different types of mail-in propaganda from different areas of the world. This is before the internet, okay? So, you know, the internet wasn't a common thing at that time. So I guess they had to find each other through mail during those years. But anyway, somehow or another, he got hooked up with all this kind of stuff. And he was into some pretty dark things. But he was still well respected throughout the community, because this is things he did behind closed doors. You know, very few people, if any at all, know of these things. But alhamdulillah, I don't care to say my grandfather has passed away now, and it's been almost 10 or 11 years, I think. And it pained my heart greatly when he passed because of our closeness. But from Allah we come, and to Allah we must return. So, inshallah, my heart heals from that. But anyway, so back to that. My dad got a special kind of status with my granddad, and he would oftentimes, or all the time, make excuses for his bad type of behavior. When my mom finally ended up getting tired of getting beat on, and getting tired of us kids being in jeopardy, and all the countless unimaginable things that are not even able, I'm not even able to discuss them on the channel, okay, for sake of being demonetized now that I am in a process of being monetized. So there were things that went on that just no good, you know, and Allah knows best about that. But my mom finally got tired of that stuff, and she left. You know, she threatened to kill him, and then she left. Which this was a common thing in the 80s. You know, in the early 80s, mid 80s, that was a common thing. Women were truly victims of a different variety in a lot of circumstances back then. Alcoholism was a major issue. You know, alcoholism is still a major issue, but back then it was a different variety. Back then it was, you get beat on, you keep it to yourself, nobody goes to jail type of thing. But anyway, she ended up having to defend herself and put a gun to his head and tell him, you touch me and my kids again, and I'm gonna end you, I'm gonna unalive you. And then she left. And subhanallah for that, you know, because we may have been all unalived ourselves by now if at that time, if that had not been the case. But anyway, so she leaves, and of course he doesn't have anything to do with me on a regular basis. He's out busy playing in his band and partying and rock star lifestyle. You know, he thought he was Mick Jagger, but it wasn't really the case. A very talented musician, but he never learned to read music, so it limited him on his abilities to go places as far as that went. But he was very talented, even as a very young kid, but it was ultimately disadvantageous to his life. So he didn't have much to do with me, which left me basically in the care of my granddad on my quote-unquote weekend for my dads, because back then, typical custody order back then was a father would get them every other weekend and the mother would have them the rest of the time. And he never made any kind of weekly payments or bi-weekly payments to support me or anything like that. But my granddad, he would try to make it an effort to come and get me every weekend. And if not, he would regularly get me every other weekend as prescribed. And he also would make the effort to buy clothing for me for school and things, because he knew things was hard on mom and she was working 2 jobs. That doesn't mean they were best friends or he was just super cooperative or super helpful to her, because that wasn't the case either. It was more out of an obligation for him to try and cover up for my dad, I feel like, looking back at it at this point, you know. He did it. I remember him writing checks to my mom back then. Personal checks were a thing as well. And he would write her checks a lot of times and say, get him school clothes or get him whatever, shoes or whatever. And that's from his daddy. No, that wasn't the case. My dad was spending all his money on booze and hoes, on hoes. I mean, I'm just keeping it real. Booze and women. He was a big time womanizer, and I can't tell you how many countless numbers of women I would see come in and out of his life, even as a kid, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. The limited time that he was around, I would witness that type of stuff. And he was also very mentally abusive, unless my granddad was around. My granddad kept him in check. Papa kept him in check. Papa was kind of like the OG Godfather type deal, the patriarchal figure, and what he said goes type of thing. But my dad was, he was a drunk. So when he wasn't around, when it benefited him, he was still mentally and emotionally abusive. For example, one time I had gotten a pet goat. My granddad had got me a pet goat. And I loved this goat. We had a pen outside of my dad's house. My granddad lived right across the street, or ended up buying property across the street. And so they were oftentimes back and forth. And he bought this goat for me, my papa did, and put a fence over at my dad's, a pen over my dad's to keep my goat. And every weekend I come over there and feed my goat. Papa would take me to feed him and pet him and play with him and all that kind of kid stuff, And this went on for I don't know how many months, until the goat was full-grown size adult goat. And one weekend I come over there and the goat is just gone. I'm just like, where's my goat? I'm a kid, I'm devastated. My goat's gone. And my dad was having one of these get-togethers, which he had frequently during the summer months. There'd be a bunch of people over drinking beer and liquor and music blasting through the whole neighborhood. And it was very traumatic. And looking back on those type of experiences, I had an aversion to being around loud things for a long time, and I had to work things out psychologically in order to get rid of the anxieties, a lot of the deep anxieties and fears that I had because of the stuff that I went through dealing with him as a kid that he didn't even consider, and probably still thinks that, oh, that's just BS, it don't have no effect, but it does. And anyway, so I come over there one weekend and my goat is gone, and he's having one of these parties and these get-togethers, and it's time to eat, and he sits me down at the table and gives me my beef stew bowl. And as I'm eating it, he leans over in my ear and he says, is that beef stew good, I said, yeah, Daddy, it's good. It's good, Daddy. And he says, that's your goat. That's your pet goat. and just started dying laughing about it. Of course, that devastated me. It devastated me that they had killed my goat, unbeknownst to me that was the plan the whole time for him to do, my granddad didn't have any idea he was going to do it. And of course, it was easier for him to ask forgiveness than permission, because if my papa had known he was going to do that to my goat, my papa would have got on him. I was a papa's boy, you know. I was the firstborn grandson, so I was special. And because of that, my dad had a lot of anger and hatred and animosity and resentment towards me, because my granddad favored me so much, mashallah. And I'm grateful for that to an extent. A lot of the things, I think I was a bit spoiled in a lot of ways, which handicapped me later in life and caused me to go through several years of rock bottom type of life, you know, having nothing and being nothing, essentially, just on this journey of life. It ended up handicapping me. So for you parents out there who are giving your kids everything, and you're giving your kids all these benefits and all these financial ups, you better be careful, because you're handicapping them in life. You're handicapping them later in life. It's good to have that stability to fall back on, but make sure it's to fall back on. And when I say fall back on, I mean in the times of extreme emergency and extreme adversity. I don't mean, oh man, I'm gonna have to dip into the savings to get this new Xbox game, and that's supposed to be for this, you know, for emergencies and yada yada. Okay, go ahead, son, get the new Xbox game. No, emergencies is emergencies. Death in the family, God forbid, something like that. It's not just to throw away with bubble gum and video games, man. Make your children be wise spenders. Make them understand the value of $1. So, Papa also tried to distill within me values. Verbally, he would tell me about the value of $1 and the importance of working hard and things to gain what you want. However, his actions often didn't times match his words, and they certainly didn't match them when it came to my dad. I would see my dad blow through every bit of any type of money that he would make, because most of the time my dad was unemployed, but then he landed a job with the state taking care of handicapped people. Figured that one out, right? And he stayed there for 10 or 12, maybe 13 years, I think. And he drew a pretty good paycheck on that. However, most of that was still blown on his toys and his vacations and things like that. He would have my papa go and take a loan out, very large loan, to buy things like a dump truck, because he was going to now be a dump truck driver on the side. And he would do this for couple of months and get tired of it, and then my granddad would be stuck, Papa would be stuck having to pay off this dump truck loan. Or he bought a semi truck, a cab over Peterbilt semi truck to pull equipment. He bought heavy equipment, front end loader for my dad to use, and this was all just money wasted, essentially. It basically, it didn't change the financial outcome or career outcome of my dad long term. It was just little business ventures and toys and things that he had big ideas but no spine to follow through with. Astaghfirullah, man, Allah forgive me for saying that, but I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you the truth, and I cleaned it up. So, needless to say, that relationship with my dad wasn't what it should be, which affected me later in life and led me down a road of alcoholism and womanizing myself, and we'll get to that later. But for the time being, my mother, I was with my mom most of the time, like I was saying, and I was very involved in school sports. And when I discovered basketball at about 10 or 11 years old, I remember the basketball player was Pistol Pete Maravich. I watched this little documentary back then on Pistol Pete Maravich, and I just thought that he was the most magical thing I had ever seen with a basketball, because he was so far ahead of his time with behind the back passes, no look passes, all these. He had mad skills dribbling, all these different things that nowadays are pretty common amongst your superstars in the NBA. They mostly have them. Allen Iverson was the first one to come out that I recall back in the day, who was real hot with the new age type of gameplay that Magic Johnson had. But I grew up in the Jordan era, the Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan era, with all of those players in the game as far as the NBA went. And I became obsessed with the game. Everywhere you see me, I had a basketball in my hand. I was still obsessed with the martial arts and fighting and training for combat and things and being a soldier. But man, when it came to that basketball, it was all time, man. I had that rock in my hand. So I would either be dribbling, or I would be spinning it on my finger, or I would be, practicing my shot, just up and down with the ball. I was all the time with the basketball, mashallah, because I loved the game. I thought it was fun. It was something that you could do and you could achieve and you could excel at on your own. And, you could turn out being great with it, mashallah. But it was so much fun. So, anyhow, that ended up causing me a lot of problems. My obsession with the game caused me a lot of problems a little later as well, because I let a lot of my schoolwork, all that kind of stuff fall behind, which ultimately led me to losing my ability to play on the team. So the thing that I loved actually ended up cutting my throat on the thing that I needed to keep in check. The responsibility aspect that I didn't fulfill could have kept me playing the game. But so we had two different sides of the track here. When I went to Dad's house and Papa's house, I was one kid, and when I would stay at home and be with my mother and my grandmother, and like I said, my mother drove a truck, and after she left and went over the road driving, I was with my grandmother most of the time. So I had to be a totally different person. And then when I went to my great grandmother's house, I had to be a totally different person there too, which I was a terror all the time. I ain't gonna lie to you. I was wild as can be. Not to say that I was just awful evil, but I was doing the typical things like torturing my sister and the neighbors and everybody else. We lived on a dead-end street growing up the first 17 years of my life with my mother. We lived in the same house on a dead-end street. I say street, but it was a gravel road in the middle of a valley that I would run them hills, baby, hill sprints, staying in shape for playing basketball. So that was my obsession, I also played baseball too. I was a pitcher. I was terrible at batting. I think I had like a .0 something batting average. I was not good at bat. But I could throw some mean pitches. So I pitched in Little League and Pee Wee and Little League and midget, and I loved the game of baseball too, but nothing was passionate like me like basketball. So because of my lack of supervision and lack of actual authority, my grandmother was oftentimes busy trying to be a grandma. She wanted to spoil us even though she lived with us. She made us do our homework, and she made us do things that we were supposed to do, and she kept us alive. But she was also our grandmother, and she didn't come down on us hard like she should have, and Allah knows the best, but I needed it worse than the average kid probably. And because of that, I fell into various forms of idiot behavior. Started smoking cigarettes, at a young age. My first cousin and I, he came to live with us when we were both young. He's 2 years younger than me. So I was 12, he was 10, and he came to live with us. And it was trouble right from the start. We loved each other. We were just good. We were good together, but we were bad together, if that makes sense. And he has passed away now. He passed away from drug overdose, and it's more like my brother than my cousin, and it's like losing a brother for me. It's been several years ago. But as kids in the country, we did a lot of things that country kids do. We smoked cigarettes, and we'd go off into the woods and talk about girls and talk about school and talk about life. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of cow tipping, but we would go we would go cow tipping, which is not really possible, by the way. So for all y'all that got kids who may happen to live around cattle, don't think that you can actually tip a cow over. It's a myth that cows sleep standing up. They actually sleep laying down, okay? You cannot do that, and you'll get chased and possibly hurt more than you will ever be successful to get even close enough to tip a cow over. I remember one night, my cousin and I, we went into the field late at night. You know, we, like most kids, we wanted to stay up all night on the weekends and watch TV, you know. And we decided we was going to go cow tipping. Like I said, it's a dead-end road surrounded by fields and hills in the valley, a bunch of cattle. So we were going to go cow tipping. So we walk out into the field, way up in the field, and we see the herd of cattle over there. They're all gathered together, you know, grazing and things. And we see a couple laying down, a couple of them standing up grazing. And of course, the majority of them run off, all of them but one. And there's one cow laying on the ground, and it just refuses to move. And no matter how close we get to it, it don't move. And you know, we're looking at each other like, is this cow dead? You know, we thought it was dead. Really and truly, it's so dark outside you couldn't see because it was laid out flat on its side. And usually they don't sleep like that. They'll sleep on their bellies kind of with their legs folded to the sides. But sometimes they will lay all the way down. But anyway, we got up on top of this thing and we realized that there's something hanging out of its butt. This cow was a female, and she was giving birth, and it was like she wasn't strong enough to push this calf out. So of course we look at each other in shock, you know, mouths hit the ground and eyes wide open. And I'm like, man, go get us some towels or some rags or something. I'm 12 at this time, mind you, and he's 10. So he runs as fast as lightning, fast as a bullet to the house, grabs some towels, and he runs back. And we grabbed this calf, and we pulled this calf out of this mother cow giving birth. And it was one of the most incredible things and disgusting things that I've ever seen or done in my life, especially as a 12-year-old kid. But it was like magic in the forest type of deal. And alhamdulillah that we got to experience that at such a young age. But it was a bit traumatizing and a bit amazing at the same time. But that's just one of many, many stories that I have, you know, concerning my cousin and I. May he rest in peace. I don't know if he accepted Islam or not, or even really knew about Islam. But inshallah, I hold out hope, because he was fairly educated for someone with, you know, extreme addiction problems. He just got too far out there. So inshallah, maybe he did, and maybe he accepted Islam. I don't know. Allah knows best, but I doubt it. But I like to hold out hope. So anyway, my grandmother, like I was saying earlier, would send us to these church functions, and we were made to go to these. It's not something that we just got all amped up about, you know. She tried to be our hype man about it, you know, and get us all hyped up about it. You know, oh, we're going to church, we're going to do this youth thing, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And we didn't care. We didn't care about that. When we got to church, we couldn't wait to get out of there and go into the back where the gym was at, so we could run around and play tag and shoot basketball and do, you know, volleyball, whatever it was, whatever kind of activities it was that they would have in order to indoctrinate us as kids. That's what we were interested in. And then it was, oh, yeah. Jesus. Yeah, cool. We know. Thank you. Can we go play ball now? So that was the only thing we were interested in as far as church went. We definitely didn't want to be there. But I remember having to go to these Sunday schools and Sunday school classes and Bible study camps and stuff like that, where they basically would force you to do these. You would do these fun activities, but they would force you to incorporate Bible ideology into this in order to indoctrinate you at a young age, which I understand, okay, because every religion does want to, you know, teach their kids about that religion. However, the way that they would do that in a bribing fashion is so reminiscent of what I was discussing on my reaction video about Diddy and the way he done all these other people by offering them money. That's basically, we were being paid to be a certain way. SubhanAllah, I'm so grateful that in Islam we don't do that. But with that being said, that was the case, and I did learn a lot of the Bible. However, I was never taught the portions of the Bible that actually mattered as far as their true dogma and their true nature. The only thing that was repetitively beat into our head was the concept of the Trinity and the concept of the haram aspects of it. And as a result of that, later in life, I would question those things, because when you're a kid, you're told to not question them. Here's a candy bar, shut up. Here's $5, shut up. Don't question these things. But as an adult, when there's nobody around to bribe you and pay you anymore, you start to question these things and ask a few questions and say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't make sense. So even as a kid, being exposed to all of this and being forced to be exposed to it, and not in a kind way, as far as like your family, the people who love you and support you and are supposed to take care of you, they forced you to go. Number one, they forced you. And oftentimes, man, we were being threatened with being grounded and everything. Now, I understand that children should be under the rule of their parents. I get that. So there has to be some type of hierarchy established. But when we get threatened to go, it kind of builds a type of early resentment about it. That you rebel, especially in a Western country, you rebel when you get to your teenage years, which is what I did. And when I discovered alcohol about 13 or 14, and when I discovered girls about 13 or 14, it was on like Donkey Kong from that point on. That was all my concern was about, that and basketball. Basketball, girls, and alcohol. Basketball, girls, and alcohol. Basketball, girls, and alcohol. I lived, sleep, ate, breathed, and thinked basketball, girls, and alcohol. And that become a major part of my identity. And I followed in the footsteps of my dad with the alcohol abuse from my early teen, from maybe even 12. I might have even been 12. From 12 on up to 16, when I eventually got my GED and went into the Army, which did not help with the alcohol aspect of it. 16 years old or not, you're going to be in situations where you are served alcohol, and that doesn't help. And I remember even at one point, I was so bad with the alcohol that on my way to summertime basketball practice, I would have to stop at my friend's house, whose father was always out of town on business or something, maybe an affair, I don't know, God knows best. But I would have to stop there in the morning time during the summer and have a shot of alcohol before I could even go to basketball practice at 16, because my hands was shaking. And I didn't understand that, but I didn't know what there was a result of alcohol. I just knew that alcohol made me feel better. And I didn't know why, but it made me feel better. And it also helped me to deal with a lot of anxieties that I had from the early childhood trauma that I didn't realize was untreated, unchecked trauma. So the alcohol, I was basically self-medicating. So going into the Army and experiencing that culture as well, and the heavy amounts of alcohol and drinking and partying that goes along with that too, certainly didn't help that. And at this time, I had strayed away from God. When I first went into basic training, I clung to my Bible like it was a life raft, because I was 16 years old. I was dropped in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in the middle of December, freezing to death around a bunch of grown men that I didn't know. And here I am thinking I'm going to be G.I. Joe. But I thought that's what it meant to be a man. You guys wouldn't let me play basketball no more. So alhamdulillah, I didn't say alhamdulillah, but so I'm going to go and join the Army and be a man now. And that's what I thought that being a man was. So that's what I did. And a little after basic and AIT, I strayed from God and focused more on secular studies and seeing different cultures of the world and different types of patterns and beliefs and things like that. And I got into studying Buddhism and meditation and Eastern philosophies, Hinduism and the aspects of that, and where Buddhism originated from Hindu thoughts, etc., etc. And that became a whole thing. And when I say that I studied these, I actually immersed myself deeply into those practices. I've always been an all or nothing type of person. And in my search for truth, I wanted to really give these things a fair shot if I were to find out whether or not they were true, because I wanted to know what happens after we die. Fear of death is what motivated me the most, and I wanted to know. And because of that, I searched through every belief system, every culture that you can imagine. I'll go into that a little bit further in detail. And I ended up getting into atheist thinking, and then from atheist thinking it led me into Satanism and black magic and things like that. So I'll touch base on this a little bit later, maybe in part 3, inshallah. I want to stop here for the sake of brevity. We're at 36 minutes right now, so it's probably going to take 7 days for this to upload, alhamdulillah. But all jokes aside, inshallah, I will touch base on this stuff a little bit further, try to pick up where I left off, if I can do so, inshallah. So anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying a little bit about my childhood, and my growing up, and kind of how my religious thinking is starting to evolve at this time, and my curiosity is starting to evolve by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I did not even know who Allah was, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a plan that I didn't know, my mama didn't know, my granny didn't know, my papa didn't know. Nobody knew but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyway, with that being said, be sure to like and subscribe. Send this to anybody that you think may find it useful or entertaining or just downright cool, inshallah. Be sure to check out becoming a channel member. We got the different tiers like I was saying. And until next time, remember that there's one God and only one God, and He alone is worthy of worship.